It depends if they had big tits or not, and they're willing to suck my knob, you know. You'd accept anything from someone who's young, bendy and pretty, wouldn't you? Depends what your mood you're in. I wouldn't really correct them, because that might be rude. But I would say to them that I'm not eccentric. I'm not eccentric at all. I know exactly what I'm doing. An eccentric is basically somebody too rich or too powerful to be called crazy, isn't it? That's what an eccentric is. A real character knows that he's pretty much exactly the same as everybody else. This is the point, whereas the eccentric doesn't really have the character to see that. So his attempts to be other are rather flimsy, aren't they? I tried to go to America, but I was deported for moral turpitude. Which is strange, really, because I'm feeling quite well, and I've never drunk turpentine in my life. I was there in all my regalia. I looked like this. My one concession to their Ivy League sensibilities was to remove my nail polish. Thought that would get me through. And I had a top hat on, a long top hat, so I was kind of pointlessly tall. But they were wearing their uniforms, the immigration customs officials. I didn't object to theirs. They took me aside and they interrogated me for 8 hours. And they said, "Is there anything you want to tell us?" Their first opening question was, "Is there anything you want to tell us about conviction?" And I racked my brains and I said, "I don't have any convictions, least of all any of those type." And then they came back and said, "We know everything about you. We know you're a crack addict. We know you're a heroin addict. We know you're a prostitute. We know that you like prostitutes. And you're very vocal about it in the UK." They knew all about the book. So I phoned my editor. I was allowed one phone call. And I phoned her up and I said, "Well, there's good news and there's bad news." And she says, "What's the good news?" And I said, "The good news is they know about the book." And she said, "What's the bad news?" And I said, "They know about the book." What you have to look at, in my case, is that I like conflict. And the point is, I was thrown out of Cubs, I got thrown out of the Scouts, I got thrown out of school, I got thrown out of art school. I mean, it's really difficult to get thrown out of art school. I got fired from the Observer for going on about anal sex on Easter Monday. I got fired from the Erotic Review. My book, Dandy in the Underworld, which was originally commissioned by Fourth Estate, I delivered it and I was fired. You know, I mean, how could you misread these signs? Is there a pattern here emerging? Given for someone that doesn't even have a job, apart from being the most beautiful man in the world, it's quite difficult to get fired from things when you're not actually employed. I'm self-employed, you know. And the great thing about being self-employed is that, well, there's two things. The first is that when you have to make decisions, you tend to agree with yourself. And the disadvantages of it is, of course, there's no sexual harassment at work. Anyway, that's an aside. The woman said to me, "You can lie here and we're going to charge you with a criminal act, or you can tell the truth and we'll deport you." So at that point, I decided that because if you go into battle and you don't care if you're killed, it makes you very strong. I only had my tongue left, and of course the tongue is the only weapon that sharpens with use. All they had was their guns. Because of course in American society, they have no wit, they can only hit. This is why they're so violent, you see, as we've discussed before. I know you're going to say, "What about Dorothy Parker?" Well, she wasn't that good. And people say the pen is mightier than the sword, but I wouldn't want to go into battle brandishing the Dorothy Parker 51. She wasn't that good. She wasn't as good as me. Then they got aggressive, and the boss guy phoned up and said, "If you don't start acting the goat, we're going to put you in prison." And he said, "A nice white boy like you won't last 2 minutes in a cell full of blacks and Hispanics," were his exact words. To which I replied, "Prison, porridge, buggery, and Class A drugs. Is there a 3-year waiting list to get in, sir?" I can't believe I didn't get shot. America, land of the free, but sadly not home of the depraved. That was my parting comments to them as they put me on the plane. I turned to them and said, "I'm the only thing of value in your country, and I'm removing it immediately."